we watched Nimona. Nimona. So I did not know what this was. It was a surprise from Kat because she wanted to see it. So here's the deal with what Nimona is. It is a animated film that just came out on streaming services. It is by... So it was by Blue Sky Studios. It's by Blue Sky Studios, and it's been in production it was in production for a long time, and it overlapped. It ran into trouble because it overlapped with the buyout, because I think Blue Sky was owned by Fox or something. Then Fox got bought by Disney, and Blue Sky got absorbed into Pixar. So the film's rights were all and it wasn't completed. It was like 80% done or something. So it got passed off to Annapurna Animation, I think is what it's called, which, yes, is the same Annapurna that is the game studio. That is the publisher of games like 12 Minutes and such, and Stray. Same people. Well, same, like, parent company, I guess. And they have their own animation studio, which was founded basically to finish this movie. And they put it out. So there's no, like, there's one little reference to Blue Sky, which to, like, oh, hey, you know, it's a little callback. But I believe they had to distribute it themselves because Disney wanted to shelve the film because of apparently I don't think it's ever been confirmed, but the theory is that it has to do with the LGBT themes present within, because this was at the time when Disney was, remember that whole weird thing where there's all those laws in Florida, like the Don't Say Gay bill and all that Disney was pushing back against. And I don't know, they had like a weird thing with LGBT themes, and they decided not to release the film and all that. So I believe Annapurna distributed it, so it's out on Netflix. And we watched it. So I did not realize this was based off of a webcomic. And it's funny because I looked it up, and the character designs have been altered significantly. It looks like the film has a very different art style to the webcomic. But I looked it up, and I was like, oh, it's that one. It's webcomic of the same name, Nimona, spelled Nimona. I've seen that character around somewhere. I didn't know what she was from, but I guess it's this comic called Nimona. It was a webcomic that was released on Tumblr from, I believe, 2012 to 2014. And it was, in 2015, after it was over, it was compiled into one graphic novel and released as a standalone book. One complete book story. And that was also when the work on the film began, like that's technically when the project started, was when the book came out, the graphic novel release. So, this is an adaptation of that webcomic. Okay, now with all that out of the way, Nimona. This movie is whatever. The film is, I thought it was very meh. It's actually been a really, really long time since I've had such a flat reaction to anything, really. Noticeably fine, noticeably mediocre. Like, it's weird because there's stuff that like doesn't inspire that much emotion in me, which I would describe as mediocre. And then there's this movie which is like deeply mediocre. It was like weirdly, it was like, wow, I feel like actively compressed watching this film. Does that make sense? I feel kind of like a corpse while I'm watching this. I'm being really mean to this movie. I remember, like, around the... while we were watching it, I just kind of, like, tapped the trackpad on Kat's laptop to see how much time was left, and we were only 40 minutes in, and it's like an hour, 40-minute movie. And I let out a very audible sigh. I thought it was quiet. I let out this kind of, I guess it wasn't that audible, but she was sitting right next to me, so, you know. I let out this, and she paused it, and she's like, "Oh, are you not?" She's like, "I heard that sigh. Are you not? Do you hate this?" And I was like, "No, it's like, I'm gonna be honest. I'm getting nothing out of this film, like really nothing." And it's weird because the movie isn't bad. In many ways, it's perfectly well made. It's I guess I could start with the positives. It has a nice art style. It has this sort of very different from what Blue Sky typically does, or is known for, which is being like a, oh, is that not Pixar? That's what Blue Sky is. That's the, you look at them, you're like, oh, it's not. It's Blue Sky. Who's Blue Sky? It's not DreamWorks? It's not, okay. They're the Sprint Mobile of animation studios, big animation studios. It's this kind of like, how would I describe it? Well, it's CG, but the characters have like the lighting and the colors are very flat in a way that it looks kind of, how do I describe this? There's totally a word for it. There's totally a word. If you look at it, it's like the characters don't have like a lot of depth to them. They kind of almost look like kind of flat, super flat 2D characters, but they have enough like, CG movement that you can tell, kind of thing. Almost like they're made of paper, like South Park. They look like South Park. That's the best way I could describe. They have that kind of. That's how they look compared to the background. That's a weird analogy, but it's like South Park. So the art style, it looks pretty nice. It's a nice looking film. The animation is pretty good. It's decently expressive. It's lively. There's some good, lighting and decent atmosphere. The environments are neat looking. I guess I can talk about what the movie's about. So the idea is it's in this kind of like techno-magical, medieval-styled world where there's like knights and monsters and they have like technology, but it uses magic. Excuse me, or you kind of infer that it uses magic. And it's all kind of very like medieval themed. And the main character is this guy named Ballister. I kept calling him Ballsucker because it's funnier. And he is a knight. He is a about to be sworn in as a knight. And this is an unprecedented event because he is a commoner. Usually knights are all from noble houses, but the queen took a chance on him. And he is the first knight who was a commoner, or first person to enter the program, I guess, the Knight Academy as a commoner. And so this is a big watershed moment for the commoner class, right? And he's in love with a guy named Golden Loin, who is another knight in training with him. So I just kind of called them Ballsucker and Golden Dick. So they're in love, and they're doing the ceremony where they're going to be knighted, and it's like a classical knighting where, the queen takes the sword and they tap it on the shoulder and all that. So, Ballman gets his sword. He goes out. He presents his sword to the queen so she can tap his shoulders, and then the hilt of the. I was watching it, and I'm like, is she gonna get JFK'd? Because it's like the most dramatic thing that could happen. And then the hilt of the sword opens up and a laser shoots out and fucking owns her. And now everyone thinks that Ballman killed the queen and he's a murderer, and what happens? Does he escape or does he go to jail? No, he escapes first. I think. Fuck, I don't remember. He ends up meeting forget what the fuck happened. What is the order that things happen in? I think he escapes and he goes to this little cabin in the woods that's just outside the city. And he meets this little girl named Nimona. Cats ruin me. I keep thinking that her name is Ramona. Every time I say it, I keep thinking Ramona Flowers. I cannot separate those two in my mind. These two words in my mind now. I keep thinking Nimona. And she's this little girl, and she can shapeshift and turn into, from what it seems, basically anything living. It seems like is there a point where she turns into like a cup or something? I don't think so. It's always like an animal or some different person, but she has like her basic form, which is this little girl with the pink hair. And she's like, hey, I want to overthrow the government, so I'm gonna help you because you killed the queen, and we're gonna go overthrow the government, which never comes up again, actually. And you kind of infer that that's just sort of like a cover story. It just sort of ends up being like she helps him uncover the mystery of who actually killed the queen, which happens to involve overthrowing the current status quo of the government. Her motivation is like a little, I don't know, I think it's just because she's going along. You kind of infer that really the reason that she's there is because she thinks of him as being like a social outcast like her, and she's just kind of doing whatever he wants to do, like as in terms of having broad goals. I guess that's why she does any of this. But yeah. So it's like a mystery where they're like trying to find, we got to track down the person who was handling the sword, and then we got to look for this thing, and then yada 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 yada. Okay, so I guess that's like the good points and the things that and the basic premise of the film. So things that I didn't care for. Okay, so the biggest thing easily is that the film has two kinds of modes that it's in, if that makes sense. It's got two kinds of tone. One is playing it straight. We're like let's just call it an adventure film. We're an adventure kind of mystery, exciting movie with a little bit of action kind of thing. And that is played very straight. And that stuff is not like the most compelling stuff in the world. And I think that's by design, because the other part of the story is like the sense of humor that the film has. It's in many ways pretty lighthearted. Nimona is a quirky character. And pretty much all of this is conveyed through dialogue. Or at least the dialogue is the main method that these two tones are expressed through. And the problem is that I don't like the dialogue. I really don't like the dialogue. The straight stuff is whatever, and the quirky stuff is really hard for me to stomach. And this is where it gets into like this is a subjective diversion, right? There's a type of person with a type of taste who's gonna like this movie a lot more than I did. I found it very difficult to enjoy because when the movie was trying to have a personality, I found it really obnoxious. I don't like Nimona as a character. I think she's annoying and unfunny and kind of try-hard. Kat told me that this was based off of a webcomic, so I knew that going into it. And as soon as Nimona started talking, I said, oh yeah, this is a webcomic that was put out on Tumblr in the early to mid 2010s. Oh yeah, it's got that smell on it. And that does not appeal to me at all. It's one of these things, when I say it's like subjective, this is not a bad movie. It's just not a very Taigen movie. It's not something that appeals specifically to me. You know, we can talk about movies that are like objectively quote unquote good, even though I think there's like limits to how important like something being objectively well made is, right? Objective critique has kind of has limited usefulness in my eyes. What am I trying to say? What is it? You use objective facts to form subjective opinions? Yeah, that's what I've always thought. So examples of Taigen movies, like pro-Taigen movies. Things that I really like. The Batman. I thought was great. That's a very Taigen movie. Angel's Egg, that old anime film. Fast Five. These are examples of Taigen movies. These are things that appeal very specifically to me. That no matter what criticisms you could make of them, at the end of the day, I liked them because they have a tone or an attitude or types of characters or dialogue or is a kind of story that just really, really hits me in a spot that I like. And Nimona has none of that. And I think that's why I had such a nothing reaction to it, because it's just... it was just kind of happening. The film just kind of happened in front of my eyes. And like, you know, it has, again, another thing between tone and mood. The film has these moments where it's trying to be funny and exciting and dramatic, and I'm watching it and I am feeling absolutely nothing because I don't really care for the characters that much, and the overall style of presentation and dialogue does not gel with me. There is someone who is going to really like this movie, but that person is not me. And so Kat was kind of surprised because she also thought it was pretty... She didn't love it. I recall she said it was pretty good. I don't often rate movies on like a number scale, but for this, I guess the most accurate thing was it kind of warbles between a 4 and a 5 out of 10, depending on what scene it is. Or what moment it is. It gets to a point in the middle where there's actually like a 10-minute span that I thought was kind of interesting when there's a big twist reveal. There's the reveal happens in the middle. Well, there's a couple reveals, but one of the biggest ones happens around the midpoint of the movie, and I actually thought it was kind of interesting. I was like, okay, well, this adds an interesting... It wasn't like the craziest twist ever, but it adds an interesting dimension to the plot. And that 10 minutes is fairly interesting. And then like the third act hits, and I immediately looked at the time how far we were, and I was like, I know exactly how the rest of this movie is going to go, and it went exactly how I thought it was going to go. Oh yeah, this is a spoilers thing too. And then the last 2 seconds of the film are the lamest thing ever. Wow, we're talking about a lot of recurring themes this episode. So Nimona, it's I hate everyone. I'm gonna turn into a big monster, and then ball sucker is like, no, I'm gonna touch your big monster chest, cause I'm your friend, and I'm gonna stop you from killing everyone. And she's like, oh, maybe I do like people or whatever, cause this person likes me, and maybe they're not all bad. Maybe he's one of the good ones. Because the thing, there's this whole racism or oppression, more specifically, actually less specifically, it's kind of broad, allegory throughout the film, because she's a monster. So Nimona's a monster, right? She can shapeshift. And there's this very obvious allegory going on between probably more so like LGBT stuff. which I thought was fine. Again, not something pointed at me. And actually, I was curious what Kat had to say about it. I asked her about it after we watched it. And she said, in her opinion, it felt a little on the nose. With scenes where Nimona's like, actually, I like being in my other forms more. Because I have to like put on this appearance for other people. Because they'll hate me otherwise. And I'm like, okay, I understand. She's gay or trans or whatever, you know? That's what's going on. And it's a perfectly fine message. It skirts around a very common... Okay. There's a really common pitfall that a lot of stories like this fall into, where, oh, we're going to have an allegory for an oppressed group. How do we do that with like a fantasy concept? Let's have this group of people that are like outcasted because people think they're dangerous or different. And in real life, it's like, oh, this group of people is oppressed because they come from a different culture, or they have a different amount of melanin in their skin and they look different, or they live a somewhat different lifestyle in their private life. They have a different idea of their identity than most other people. Really things that don't influence who you are or how good you are as a person, right? Like, we're all people and we're all human beings, and that's why bigotry is dumb and regressive, because we should all be able to recognize each other as common people. And a lot of stories choose to be like, yeah, this group is oppressed because if they're not careful, they can blow you up with their mind. They can fucking kill you instantly if they get mad at you or something like that. Or they'll eat people. And the metaphor completely falls apart because, okay, there's a YouTuber, Danny Gonzalez. He's like a commentary YouTuber, and he will do these videos every now and again on people. People will send him Disney Channel original movies, aka DCOMs. And he did this one from, like, I don't know, the recent years, I guess, called Zombies. And it's literally this. It's about segregation in this town between regular humans and a population of zombies. And they're, like, trying to make it this whole, like, racial segregation thing. But the zombies, they aren't like, oh, they don't actually have to eat people. They're just misunderstood, and people are, you know, whatever, unreasonable. No, like, they're literal, like, they're they're zombies. They will eat people, and they have an uncontrollable urge to eat human flesh. And the only reason they don't in this movie is because they have this little armband that, like, psychically calms them. It's fucking weird plot device. And, like, if that thing malfunctions, which it does in the movie, they literally cannot stop themselves from, like, attacking humans and trying to eat them. The metaphor does not work. That's not what black people do. I don't think. Black people just practice alchemy in their basement. That's a callback to a very old podcast bit. Comment if you got that reference. This film, thankfully, is actually pretty intelligent about it. And I think is aware of that kind of pitfall. Because they have this whole thing of, like, these knights trained to defend the kingdom from monsters. But you never see a monster that's not Nimona. She's the only frame of reference you have for monsters. And the whole city, including the forest around it, is surrounded by a wall. They're walled off from the outside world, and there's actually no confirmation that there are actually dangerous monsters outside. It's just kind of like a thing that is accepted that it has to be this way, or else we're gonna die, we're gonna get completely overrun. And so when characters are bigoted against Nimona and monsters, It's coming from a place of never having like no experience and no real data to even base your opinion off of. It isn't even like, oh yeah, no, like we know there's like big ass monsters out there and they will like kill you and eat you and destroy our society. No, there's literally nothing to go off of besides essentially this old legend that is unsubstantiated. And as you learn later, is not entirely true. Shocker. So it actually does subvert it. I mean, Nimona is still totally capable of turning into like a gigantic monster and killing everyone, but like she doesn't have to. It's not like her nature to do so. So it's like a little. It's a little better than those other kinds of examples of that kind of a plot. Yeah. I mean, what else? I really just don't have a lot to say about it. Oh, the ending. Right. I was talking about the ending and I got sidetracked. So they're going to shoot this big ass fucking cannon into the city to kill Nimona and wipe out like half of the civilization because she's the lady is so, the villain is so racist. Excuse me. And Nimona flies and absorbs the whole shot, and then the thing explodes, and it's all, and like, oh my god, Nimona's dead, and then but it blows open a hole in the wall, and we cut forward to a few months, and people are now traveling outside of the wall, and Nimona is now considered a hero, and the opinion on monsters has the stigma has been broken, and people are more open-minded. Literally, they've got the wall. It's like a literal representation. It's open now. And it's like, well, all's well that ends well, besides her dying, you know. And Ballman is all cool with his boyfriend, and everyone's happy. But Nimona's gone. There's a little bit of a somberness that, you know, she died for that, right? And then in literally the last 5 seconds, she shows up as a disembodied voice, and Ballsack turns around to look at something off camera, and he's like, "Oh my god!" And it's 100% just that Nimona's back, and she didn't actually die or something. And I was like, "That's the lamest fucking way you could have ended this movie. Why did you do that? Why did you have to do? Can we just let it rest? It's the end of the movie. It doesn't matter. Let it be." Just commit. I hate that shit. It's like just like Mufasa. It's just like Mufasa at the end of The Lion King 2. When they have him speak, and it's like, come on, dude, come on. Yeah, I don't know. The movie's whatever. Kat was very surprised because she didn't love it, and she was surprised because it was like a 90-something% on Rotten Tomatoes from like audience scores or something like that. This movie's getting incredible praise. And we watched it and we had she liked it more than me, but not by that much. She just liked Nimona. Like, that was the main difference, is that she was fine with the dialogue and the personality, and I did not care for it. And I was thinking, I'm like, no, it's totally... This movie is getting hyped up because of the narrative. It's the narrative of, oh, Blue Sky, you know, that like animation studio that a lot of people like wrote off. They actually, like, did you know that their last movie was going to be this awesome thing? It was this adaptation of a webcomic. It had all this like cool progressive stuff in it. And then Disney bought them out, and Disney didn't like the gay stuff in it, so they shut it down, but it got finished by another studio. And they released it on Netflix, and it's coming out, and it's like this whole good vibes, good feeling story. Like, yeah, actually, it's the movie that was going to be kept down but that the mouse doesn't want you to see, man. That the man's keeping down. But it's actually like this awesome movie. It's 100% like millennials who like cartoons and have YouTube channels and Twitter accounts where they talk about cartoons a lot are freaking the fuck out about it because the narrative is good of it, when in my opinion it's very middle of the road. It's different. It's definitely different. compared to most animated family films, which this is, you know. But nothing really that special, in my opinion. Maybe if the themes really hit home for you, then you'll like it more. But yeah, I think it's funny because we were talking about this because we were talking about like the LGBT themes in it, and they're not like, it's mostly in Nimona, and then like there's like an on-screen gay kiss, and they're very upfront with like the fact that, oh yeah, they don't hide from the fact that this guy is in a relationship with another man, which I thought was nice. It was like, it's fucking, I don't know, it's rare to see in like an animated film something like that so casually acknowledged. It was at least nice, you know, to just treat it like a regular thing. And what were we talking? I was like, oh yeah, no, it's very like, was it just even about the movie? It was this funny observation that I made when I was doing research for the most recent video. Because as kind of like a guiding point, I was using a Wikipedia page called, it's like list of LGBT characters in video games or something like that. Which is the usual part of my research process, is I find a Wikipedia page and then I dig through it and look for interesting things and look for sources on it. And Wikipedia is great at that, as just like a central reference that you can then go look for like primary sources from. And so they have it broken down by decade. And it's really funny because for the majority of time, all the way from like the 80s through the 2000s, most examples that they list are like, this character is gay. This character is implied to be, you know, homosexual. This character is implied to be trans. This character is optionally gay if you choose to romance a same-sex character. It's a lot of stuff like that. And like one example per game. And then you get to like the 2010s with oh, this is why we were talking about it. It's because she said that it was a little on the nose and she wondered if it was the studio that kind of pushed it a little harder. And I was thinking, I think it's just the author. I'm assuming that the author of it is Ligbit in some way. And I'm assuming that because I noted while I was doing research for this that once you get to the 2010s and you get to like more like indie games and things like that, where it's like just one person is able to do whatever they want in a game, that's when you start getting those like, the main character is a asexual, pan-romantic, transgender, disabled, they have depression, and they have a girlfriend who's a this and that, and it's this like, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this thing, and this thing, and this thing. Of 1,000 words that you've only ever seen on Twitter. I'm trying not to be disparaging. It's that kind of thing. Like, it's so obvious. And I don't think that's a bad thing. It's just, it's like, well, if you haven't been able to see stuff that represents you or you're kind of a subculture or something like that, and then suddenly you have the chance to be your own this is why creative stuff is great, because it's like, wow, I remember when I first started writing in high school, like writing fiction for real, and I was like, wow, I can actually just write stories. I don't have to just sit around and hope that someone writes a story about this thing. I can just write that story myself, and it's a very liberating thing. It's a very natural thing to be like, I want to put a bunch of stuff that speaks to me into a thing. It's just funny. It's just really funny is all I'm saying. That you get this like, and this and this and this thing. It's like, whoa, all right. It obviously comes from someone embedded in that sort of a sphere, a kind of an identity, a background. And to me, I imagine that it was the same with, like, you know, this was a webcomic. I'm actually curious if you've read the comic. I'm curious what you think of the movie compared to it, and how good of an adaptation it is. I was wondering if perhaps the themes were a little bit compressed, and maybe in the comic they are more spread out or something like that, and and a little less like we're gonna give it to you very on the nose about what the film is about. I would be curious, and actually Kat said she was really interested to read the comic now, because she was wondering how it compared to the movie. But yeah, Nimona. Oh yeah, so there's the one reference to blue sky in the film, which is they're flying down to like through kind of a seedy part of the city, and there's a billboard on the side that says like, excuse me, it's on the side of the frame, and it says like blue sky never dies or something like that. There's the billboard says blue sky, and there's like graffiti over it that says like never dies or never die, something like that. So there's like a nod to it. But yeah, Nimona, a very, in my opinion, a very meh movie that didn't really do anything that particularly appealed to me or interested me. I watched the whole thing with a flat expression, and my emotions barely changed from beginning to end until the very last few seconds, where I was very annoyed at how lame that ending was. If it sounds interesting at all, check it out for yourself. I'm very open to the idea that someone else would like this a lot more than me. But I'm gonna, on the Taigen scale, I'm gonna have to give this a... nah. And I think that's about it for today.